The blizzard hit without the warning the weather service promised. I'd been photographing winter landscapes in the Bitterroot Mountains for 2 weeks, comfortable in my remote cabin, when the temperature dropped 30 degrees in less than an hour. By nightfall, the wind screamed through the pines with a fury that made my windows rattle. I was 46 years old, divorced 3 years, and I'd chosen this solitary life deliberately. After 20 years photographing wildlife for nature magazines, I craved silence more than companionship. The cabin provided both workspace and refuge, miles from the nearest neighbor. I was preparing for bed around 10 when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. Something was scratching at my front door, weak and irregular. My first thought was a branch blown against the wood. But then I heard it again, more deliberate this time, almost like knocking. I grabbed my flashlight and peered through the window beside the door. What I saw made my breath catch. A bobcat, fully grown and magnificent despite his condition, lay collapsed on my porch. His spotted coat was matted with ice and snow. One front paw looked wrong, held at an awkward angle. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow. Every instinct screamed danger. Bobcats were wild predators, unpredictable and powerful. Bringing one inside could end very badly. But looking at him lying there, clearly dying, I couldn't just close the curtain and return to my warm bed. I stood frozen, hand on the doorknob, weighing impossible choices. Outside, the wind howled louder. The bobcat's eyes flickered open briefly, meeting mine through the glass. In that moment, my decision was made. I pulled on my heaviest gloves and grabbed a thick blanket before opening the door. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. The bobcat didn't move as I approached, which terrified me more than aggression would have. A wild animal that didn't flee from humans was either habituated or near death. I suspected the latter. Kneeling carefully, I spoke in low, steady tones, though I doubted he could hear me over the wind. His eyes tracked my movements with dim awareness. I could see ice crystals forming in his whiskers. His injured paw was badly swollen, possibly broken or caught in something before he escaped. Working quickly, I spread the blanket beside him and tried to assess my options. He was heavy, probably 40 pounds of muscle and bone. Moving him risked injury to both of us if he panicked, but leaving him meant certain death. I made my choice. Talking continuously in what I hoped was a soothing voice, I worked the blanket underneath his body. He made a sound, something between a growl and a whimper, but didn't struggle. That scared me most of all. I dragged him inside, blanket and all, and shut the door against the storm. My cabin suddenly felt very small. I'd just brought an apex predator into my living space. The absurdity of the situation hit me as I stood there, breathless, staring at the wild animal now lying on my floor. He opened his eyes fully for the first time, and I saw intelligence there, along with pain and exhaustion. I'd committed now, no turning back. I grabbed more blankets and positioned him near the fireplace, not too close to overheat, but close enough for warmth. Then I started making phone calls, hoping someone could tell me I hadn't just made a fatal mistake. The veterinarian, Dr. Sarah Chen, answered on the 4th ring, her voice groggy. When I explained the situation, there was a long pause. Then she asked if I was insane. Probably, I admitted, but he was in my cabin now, and I needed guidance. Sarah had treated my dogs before I moved to the cabin full-time. She knew I wasn't reckless, which made this situation harder to explain. She asked about his condition, his breathing, whether he showed signs of aggression. I described everything while watching him from across the room. His eyes were closed again, his breathing rapid and shallow. Sarah's assessment was grim. Hypothermia, possible broken bones, likely dehydration, and the stress of human contact could trigger cardiac arrest in his weakened state. The nearest wildlife rehabilitation center was 2 hours away in good weather, impossible to reach in this blizzard. She could try to come at first light if the roads cleared, but until then, I was on my own. Her instructions were precise. Keep him warm, but not hot. Don't try to feed him yet. Watch for respiratory distress. Most importantly, give him space and don't approach unless absolutely necessary. If he regained strength and felt threatened, he could attack. I was dealing with a wild predator, not a house cat. After we hung up, I sat on my couch, keeping the coffee table between us. The bobcat's breathing seemed to ease slightly as warmth from the fire penetrated his body. Ice melted from his fur, forming puddles on the blanket. I found myself studying him with a photographer's eye. He was beautiful, even in this diminished state. His coat was thick winter pelage, tawny with dark spots and bars. His tufted ears, a bobcat's signature feature, twitched occasionally. His paws were enormous, built for silent stalking through snow. The night stretched endlessly. I dozed in fits, jerking awake at every sound. Around 3 in the morning, I woke to find the bobcat watching me. His eyes glowed amber in the firelight, utterly alien and strangely calm. We stared at each other across the small room. My heart hammered, but I forced myself to remain still. Sudden movements could trigger his predatory instincts. After what felt like hours, but was probably seconds, he lowered his head back to the blanket and closed his eyes. I released a breath I hadn't known I was holding. As dawn approached, I noticed changes. His breathing was stronger, more regular. The unnatural stillness that had frightened me was gone, replaced by the tense awareness of a wild thing. He shifted positions occasionally, clearly uncomfortable but gaining strength. His injured paw remained swollen, but he tucked it against his body protectively. I needed to assess the damage, but approaching him seemed increasingly dangerous as he recovered. By sunrise, the blizzard had weakened to steady snowfall. I texted Sarah, who responded that she'd try to reach me by noon. Until then, keep distance and stay safe. The bobcat solved my dilemma about approach by rising unsteadily to his feet. I froze, pulse racing as he tested his weight. 3 legs held him, but the injured paw he kept lifted. He looked around the cabin, taking in his surroundings with obvious intelligence. His gaze settled on the water bowl I'd left nearby, placed there hours ago on Sarah's advice. He limped toward it, awkward but determined. I held my breath as he drank deeply, his pink tongue lapping water with the same mechanics as any cat, just scaled larger and infinitely wilder. When he finished, he looked directly at me again. Something passed between us in that moment, some acknowledgement I couldn't name. The bobcat claimed the space beside the fireplace as his own. He settled back onto the blankets with a grace that belied his injury, arranging himself with his back to the warm stones and his eyes on the room, on me. I moved to the kitchen area, trying to appear non-threatening while making coffee. My hands shook as I measured grounds. The reality of my situation kept hitting me in waves. A wild bobcat was recuperating in my living room. This was either the best wildlife photography opportunity of my career or the worst decision I'd ever made. Possibly both. I'd photographed bobcats before, always from distance with telephoto lenses. They were notoriously elusive, more often spotted as tracks in snow than actual sightings. To have one this close to observe his behavior and personality was extraordinary. The photographer in me itched for my camera. The sensible part of my brain screamed that documenting this was the least of my concerns. Around 9, the bobcat made a sound I'd never heard before, a sort of chirping chatter. He was looking toward the window where birds clustered at my feeder. His hunting instinct was intact then, good sign for his recovery, concerning for my immediate safety. I'd hung that feeder to photograph songbirds. Now it was tormenting my unexpected guest. I found myself talking to him as I moved around the cabin, keeping up a steady stream of narration, explaining what I was doing, where I was going, that I meant no harm. He tracked my movements but seemed less tense when I vocalized. Maybe my voice was becoming familiar, less threatening. Or maybe I was projecting, finding patterns where none existed. Sarah called at 10. The roads were still dangerous, but she'd loaded her truck with supplies and was attempting the drive. She'd bring sedatives, antibiotics, and equipment to properly examine his leg. She also brought a warning. Sarah arrived just before noon, cautious and clearly questioning her own judgment. Through the window, I watched her approach the cabin slowly, medical bag in hand, eyes scanning for danger. I opened the door before she knocked, not wanting sudden sounds to startle my guest. She stepped inside and stopped immediately. The bobcat had raised his head at the intrusion, ears flattened, lips pulled back slightly. Not a full threat display, but definitely a warning. Sarah set her bag down carefully and spoke in low, professional tones. She'd brought a tranquilizer, but using it carried risks given his weakened state. Better to try examination without sedation if he'd tolerate it. I explained how calm he'd been, how he'd drunk water and seemed to be gaining strength. Sarah listened while studying him, her expression shifting from concern to fascination. She'd worked with wildlife rehabilitation, but rarely with healthy adult bobcats, and never in someone's living room. We developed a plan. Sarah would prepare equipment while I maintained distance. She'd approach slowly, talking continuously, ready to retreat if he showed aggression. The goal was to examine his paw and check for other injuries. If he allowed it, she'd administer antibiotics. If not, we'd reassess. I positioned myself across the room, camera ready despite Sarah's eye roll. If this went badly, at least there'd be documentation. If it went well, I'd have unprecedented footage. Sarah began her approach, speaking in calm, measured tones. The bobcat watched her, tense but not panicking. She knelt several feet away, letting him adjust to her presence. Minutes passed. Slowly, incredibly slowly, she moved closer. The bobcat's eyes never left her, his body coiled tight. When Sarah reached toward him, I stopped breathing. He growled, a sound that vibrated through the cabin. Sarah froze. They stayed like that, locked in tense negotiation, predator and healer weighing options. What happened next defied everything I knew about wild animal behavior. The bobcat, still growling, extended his injured paw toward Sarah. The gesture was unmistakable, deliberate. He was presenting the source of his pain to the stranger who'd approached him. Sarah's eyes widened. In her 15 years of veterinary practice, she'd never seen anything like it. Moving with extraordinary care, she examined the paw while speaking in soothing tones. The bobcat's growl faded to silence, though tension remained in every line of his body. I captured it all through my lens, hands steadier now with focus. Sarah's examination revealed a deep laceration between his paw pads, infected and swollen. Likely he'd stepped on something sharp, barbed wire or broken glass, and the wound had festered. Without treatment, infection could spread to the bone. She needed to clean it, a painful process. Sarah looked at me, uncertainty clear on her face. This required trust the bobcat had no reason to give, but we'd come this far. Sarah retrieved supplies from her bag, moving slowly, explaining each action aloud. She prepared antiseptic wash and antibiotics, her movements deliberate and calm. The bobcat watched everything, alert but eerily still. When Sarah touched the wound, his entire body tensed. I braced for attack. Instead, he made that chirping sound again, almost questioning. Sarah worked quickly but gently, cleaning the infection, applying antibiotic ointment. The bobcat trembled, clearly in pain, but he didn't pull away, didn't strike, didn't flee. When she finished and backed away, he withdrew his paw and began licking the treated area. Sarah sat back on her heels, visibly shaken. In all her experience, she'd never witnessed this level of cooperation from a wild predator. It defied standard animal behavior models. Either this bobcat was extraordinarily intelligent, or his desperation overrode natural instincts. Probably both. Sarah administered antibiotics and left supplies for continued treatment. Before departing, she checked him thoroughly for other injuries. Aside from the poor and mild hypothermia effects, he was healthy. Probably 3 or 4 years old, prime age for a male bobcat. Well-muscled and well-fed before this incident. She estimated he'd been injured 2 or 3 days before finding my cabin, surviving on determination alone. She gave me instructions for his care, warning this wasn't domestication. He was wild, would always be wild, and could become dangerous as he healed. I should contact the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center as soon as weather permitted. They'd take him for proper recovery and eventual release. I agreed, though something in my chest tightened at the thought. After Sarah left, the cabin felt quieter. The bobcat slept deeply, exhausted by the examination. I sat nearby, processing what had happened. That moment when he'd extended his paw replayed in my mind. The trust required for that action was staggering. Or maybe not trust exactly. Maybe just intelligence, recognizing that these strange beings were trying to help. I found myself wondering about his life before this, where he'd lived, what he'd hunted, whether he had a mate or territory. Bobcats were solitary creatures, but they weren't emotionless. They played, they communicated, they made decisions based on complex assessments of risk and reward. This one had assessed that seeking human help was worth the risk. That calculation had saved his life. Over the next 3 days, we developed a routine. I maintained distance, going about my normal activities while giving him space. I provided water and, on Sarah's advice, raw chicken I had in my freezer. He ate cautiously at first, then with growing appetite. Good sign his body was healing. He slept most of the time, that deep recuperative sleep animals need after trauma. When awake, he watched me with those luminous amber eyes. On the 4th morning, I woke to find the bobcat sitting upright, looking at the door. His paw, while still tender, was healing remarkably well. The swelling had reduced, and he was putting weight on it occasionally. I felt relief mixed with sadness. Recovery meant release, returning him to the wild where he belonged, but I'd grown accustomed to his presence, the knowledge that this magnificent creature trusted me enough to heal in my space. I opened the door to check the weather, and he stood immediately, limping toward the opening. My heart clenched. Was he leaving already? But he stopped at the threshold, looking out at the snow-covered landscape, then back at me. The look held something I couldn't quite interpret. He stepped onto the porch, tested his weight, then returned inside. Not ready yet. Over the following days, he grew stronger and more active. He explored the cabin, investigating corners with careful curiosity. He discovered the window seat where I usually worked and claimed it as an observation post. From there, he watched birds, squirrels, and the deer that passed through my clearing. I photographed him constantly, unable to resist. These images would never be published. I had no permits for wildlife rehabilitation, and publicizing this could bring trouble. But I needed to document what I was experiencing. The relationship developing between us defied easy categorization. Not domestication, definitely not. He remained utterly wild, his responses driven by instinct and intelligence rather than training. But something existed between us, built on mutual respect and the memory of vulnerability. He'd learned I wouldn't hurt him. I'd learned he was far more than simple predator programming. 1 week after his arrival, the bobcat did something that stopped my heart. I was working at my laptop when he jumped down from the window seat and approached me directly for the first time. Every muscle in my body tensed. He stopped 2 feet away, studying me with that intense, alien intelligence. The bobcat sat down, wrapped his tail around his paws, and simply looked at me. Not threatening, not begging, just observing with what felt like deliberate acknowledgement. We stayed like that for several minutes, and I barely breathed. Then he stood, turned, and returned to his spot by the fireplace. Something fundamental had shifted. The distance he'd maintained wasn't about fear anymore. It was about respect for boundaries, his and mine. Over the next few days, he approached more frequently, never demanding touch, never invading my space aggressively, but making his presence known. Once, when I was reading on the couch, he settled on the floor nearby, not touching, but close, sharing space rather than just occupying it. I contacted the rehabilitation center, explained the situation in vague terms. They had space available and could take him whenever weather permitted the drive. They'd assess his readiness for release and handle it properly. It was the right thing to do. So why did the thought make me feel like I was betraying something sacred? 2 weeks after his arrival, the Bobcat's paw had healed enough for normal movement. He paced the cabin restlessly, energy returning. He needed more space, more stimulation than my small home could provide. He needed his wildlife back. The night before I planned to transport him, I sat by the fireplace watching him sleep. He'd changed my understanding of wild animals, of the capacity for communication across species. He'd trusted me when trust should have been impossible. He'd shown intelligence and emotional complexity I'd only theorized about before. I'd spent 20 years photographing wildlife from distance, maintaining professional objectivity. This bobcat had obliterated that distance, forced me to see him as an individual, not just a representative of his species. It was a gift I hadn't asked for, but would treasure forever. Around midnight, he woke and found me watching. Instead of returning to sleep, he stood and walked over to where I sat. My breath caught as the bobcat approached closer than he'd ever ventured. He stopped directly in front of me, so close I could see the intricate patterns in his amber irises, smell the wild scent of his fur. For a long moment, we looked at each other. Then he did something impossible. He pressed his broad head against my knee, just for a second before stepping back. It wasn't affection in the way a house cat shows it. It was acknowledgement, gratitude maybe, or simply farewell. A recognition of what had passed between us. Tears blurred my vision as he returned to his spot by the fire. I sat frozen, my knee still warm where he'd touched it, trying to comprehend what had just happened. This wild creature had chosen to make contact, to bridge the space between species one final time before returning to his world. The next morning, I loaded a large crate into my truck. The rehabilitation center had provided detailed instructions for safe transport. I'd expected resistance, maybe even impossibility, getting him into the crate. Instead, when I opened it and stepped back, the bobcat examined it briefly and walked inside. He understood somehow that this was the next step. That level of comprehension shook me. The drive to the rehabilitation center took 3 hours. I kept checking the rearview mirror, seeing his eyes reflecting back at me. He remained calm, trusting the process. At the center, staff emerged, prepared for a difficult extraction. They'd dealt with wild bobcats before and knew the danger. They were shocked when he simply walked out of the crate and allowed himself to be guided into a large outdoor enclosure. Dr. Martinez, the center's director, examined him while I explained the full story. She listened with growing amazement, particularly when I described his cooperation during Sarah's treatment. She'd worked with hundreds of wild animals, she told me, and this behavior was extraordinary. Either I'd encountered an exceptionally intelligent individual, or stress had temporarily altered his normal responses. Probably both. The rehabilitation center's enclosure was large, designed to help animals rebuild strength before release. Through the fence, I watched the bobcat explore his new space. He moved with increasing confidence, his healed paw bearing weight normally. This was good. This was right. So why did it feel like my heart was breaking? Dr. Martinez explained the release protocol. They'd monitor him for another week, ensuring he could hunt and navigate properly. Then they'd release him in protected wilderness, far from human development but similar to his original territory. He'd have every chance at normal wildlife. I visited 3 times over that week, always keeping distance as staff advised. Each time the bobcat would spot me and approach the fence line. Not begging for release, just acknowledging my presence. On my final visit, Dr. Martinez said he was ready. They'd release him the following morning. I was welcome to attend, though most people found it emotionally difficult. I arrived before dawn. The transport team had already loaded the bobcat into a specialized crate. We drove deep into the Bitterroot Mountains, to a remote area with healthy prey populations and no nearby human settlements. The location was perfect bobcat habitat. At the release site, Dr. Martinez explained the process. They'd open the crate and retreat to vehicles. Most animals fled immediately, disappearing into wilderness. Some hesitated, disoriented. Very rarely, an animal refused to leave, too traumatized by captivity. The team positioned the crate at the edge of a meadow, forest thick on 3 sides. They opened the door and hurried back to the trucks. We waited in silence, all eyes on that open door. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. My heart sank. Had we broken something in him, made him too dependent? Then he emerged, stepping into morning light with regal composure. He scanned the meadow, the trees, the sky. His body language shifted, wildness returning like a cloak. This was his world. The bobcat took 3 steps into the meadow, then stopped. He turned back toward the vehicles, toward where I stood watching. Our eyes met across 50 yards of space. I felt it again, that connection that shouldn't exist between wild predator and human observer. He held my gaze for several heartbeats. Then he did something that made Dr. Martinez gasp beside me. He sat down, slowly and deliberately, and wrapped his tail around his paws. The same position he'd taken in my cabin, that moment of acknowledgement. My vision blurred with tears. He was saying goodbye. After a moment, he stood and turned away. He moved into tall grass, with fluid grace, injured paw showing no impediment. At the forest edge, he paused one final time, glancing back. Then he was gone, melting into shadows and trees like smoke, like he'd never been there at all. We waited another 30 minutes, but he didn't reappear. Dr. Martinez touched my shoulder gently. It was done. He was home. The drive back to my cabin felt surreal. The space beside the fireplace looked empty, though I'd already removed the blankets. I sat in the silence, processing what had happened over the past 3 weeks. A dying bobcat had appeared at my door during a blizzard. I'd made an irrational choice to help. Together, we'd navigated impossible territory between wild and domestic, predator and prey, fear and trust. He'd shown me intelligence and emotional depth I'd only suspected existed in wild animals. He'd changed how I'd work going forward, how I'd see the subjects of my photography. Not as beautiful objects to capture through a lens, but as individuals with inner lives, as complex as my own. 6 months later, I was photographing winter landscapes in the same area where he'd been released. I didn't expect to see him. Bobcats are masters of invisibility. But as I packed my equipment at dusk, movement caught my eye. There, at the tree line, a bobcat sat watching me. Large male, distinctive spotted coat. Our eyes met, and I knew. He sat there for perhaps a minute, then stood and vanished into the forest. I never saw him again, but I didn't need to. That moment was enough. A reminder that wild things can touch our lives briefly and profoundly, then return to where they belong, carrying the memory of kindness into the wilderness. Some connections transcend species and circumstance. This was one of them, and it had changed everything.